You wake up in the morning, you got no energy, no spark, you're just fatigued and tired. And you feel that across kind of all parts of your life. It's not just like I didn't get enough sleep, but it's like I don't have the energy to care.
Hey, bootstrappers! Welcome to Bootstrap Stories, the podcast where founders, marketers, and thoughtful leaders share the most actionable tips on building a successful business. After meeting with hundreds of bootstrappers in the past years, I figured out that we all struggle to grow our businesses. But the truth is that most of us don't know where to ask for help or advice. That's why I decided to start this podcast, to give you all the keys to succeed at every stage of your business. All the tested strategies for solving your struggles and taking your business to a new level. No fluff, no bullshit, only a real talk between friends that help each other succeed. Today, my guest for this episode is Dr. Sherry Walling, host of the podcast, Zen founder, and author of the book, The Entrepreneur's Guide to Keeping Your Shit Together. Sherry, welcome to Bootstrap Stories.
It is good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
I'm super excited to have you on. And for those, who are maybe not aware of what you do and who you are, can you please give us a bit of background?
Sure. So I'm a clinical psychologist by training. So I have a PhD in clinical psychology and then master's degrees in psychology and theology. So I went to school for a super long time. Yeah, like ridiculous amount of education. And quite simply, I take care of entrepreneurs. So I started in my career working with people who had high intensity jobs. So people who are coming out of the military, people who were emergency physicians, first responders. And I really like the intensity of working with people who are doing things that they care tremendously about, but also, cause them a lot of stress and heartache. And so I was doing that kind of work. And then I was married to a tech entrepreneur. My husband's name is Rob. And so I was hanging out with all of these entrepreneurs. That's who was in my living room, and realized that a lot of them were having some of the same mental health challenges that my clinical clients were having. So I made the transition I guess it's about 7 years now.
Wow.
To really focus on the mental health of entrepreneurs. And that's what I do all the time now.
Awesome. And how exactly do you help entrepreneurs on the practical side?
Yeah. So I do a number of different things. One is really providing education and thoughtful conversation around mental health. So one of my missions is to just normalize conversations around mental health among entrepreneurs. So that means a podcast, that means writing, it means like just being in public and having enough of these conversations that it just becomes more normal. So I do a lot of speaking and, spreading the word kind of stuff. And then I also work one-on-one with entrepreneurs, and that maybe looks a little bit like therapy, but it really is kind of coaching, consulting, helping entrepreneurs think about how to implement more mental health practices within their own individual lives, and with an awareness of how that then sort of trickles down to their companies. So I do a lot of one-on-one coaching. Every once in a while, I'll work with an entire company. So maybe I'll do a series of webinars for them around mental health practices within their business, or I'll work with an entire executive team. I also love to help come in and host company retreats and get people thinking about wellness and well-being.
No, that's really cool. And why do you think mental health is such an important topic for entrepreneurs?
I mean, I think mental health, the way that I think about it is really mental wellness. And when you think about what you're doing as an entrepreneur, like your core skill set is usually some level of creativity and innovation. It's usually involving communication, relationships. You're relating to your team, to your customers, to a variety of people around you. And all of those are mental health related skills. So everything that an entrepreneur does really draws from their mental well-being, their emotional wellness. And when that is off kilter, when entrepreneurs struggle to make decisions, when they struggle to relate well with others, when they struggle to communicate, it can absolutely derail the company quite quickly. I think mental health is one of the things that will make or break you as an entrepreneur. So I can't think of a more important thing to be talking about personally.
And do you feel like there is that mental health is kind of taboo for entrepreneurs in general? And if yes, why?
I think the conversation around mental health is changing. It's certainly changed in the 7 years that I've been talking about it a lot. I think initially it was met with a lot of stigma and resistance. There's a sense that if you're not killing it, if you're not 100% in and firing on all cylinders, that maybe you're a liability, or maybe your company, people shouldn't invest in your company, or can't trust that you'll be able to succeed in your entrepreneurial venue. But I think what's changed is that there's more of an awareness that the ups and downs of entrepreneurship are pretty normal, and that many high profile, very successful founders struggle with depression or anxiety at some point. I think the COVID pandemic has also been somewhat helpful in moving forward this conversation, because there's been this sort of community crisis in which everyone around the world has suddenly had this major disruption, and we're all trying to find our footing from a mental health perspective. And I think, again, that has normalized mental health at work. How do we do our best work in difficult situations? So that, I think, has brought it to the consciousness in a way that's really helpful. It's
And
still a
yeah,
rough
sorry.
go. I think we're still, especially when it comes to folks who are really struggling, feeling like it's okay to get help and to talk to people about what they need. I still think we're working on more acceptance of that as a culture and as an entrepreneurial community.
Yeah, I agree. And do you feel like there is a perfect recipe to staying like in a high wellness mentally, or?
I think that a conversation about prevention is really helpful. So we know a lot about what breaks humans, and we can reverse engineer that pretty well. So if I were to say the recipe for high performance, it really does start sort of foundationally with your body. It means getting a lot of sleep. It means drinking a lot of water. It means having movement. It means taking care of your body so that your body can then support the functioning of your brain. Mental health is not separate from physical health. And so it's really hard to have any kind of strong emotional wellness without having really great physical practices in place. So that's kind of starting point number one. That's kind of like the flour of the recipe, right? If we're making bread, it's a really core ingredient. You can't make mental health without a healthy body.
So healthy body, healthy mind, essentially.
Yeah. Yep. And then I would add on top of that, a sense of relationship and relational connectedness. That gets tricky for entrepreneurs, especially in early startup phase when they're working lots and lots of hours. It's easy to let relationships go, but we are innately relational creatures. And so we don't have to have lots and lots and lots of friends, but we need to have a couple core relationships where we feel supported. And without that in place, mental health becomes very difficult. So that's another of that sort of key ingredients in the recipe for mental health.
Nice. And, I feel like a lot of people tend more and more to talk about like burnout, and we see a lot of entrepreneurs actually like burning out. How exactly do you recognize, or do you know if you're in a burnout or not?
Yeah. So burnout, I think I'm really glad to hear people talking about it a lot, because can be quite a serious experience. It really changes the structure and the function of the brain. Like, we can see on a brain scan how someone's like actual structure of their brain changes when they're living in burnout. So burnout is really a severe level of exhaustion. And the way that we define that, there are three kind of symptom clusters that make up burnout when we talk about the technical definition of burnout. And the first one is a sense of emotional and physical exhaustion. That's probably the thing we most often think of, right? You wake up in the morning, you got no energy, no spark, you're just fatigued and tired. And you feel that across kind of all parts of your life. It's not just like I didn't get enough sleep, but it's like, I don't have the energy to care. There's not a lot of connection to your work or to the people around you. So that's physical and emotional exhaustion. And the second symptom cluster or component of burnout is a sense of detachment and cynicism. So if you don't have the energy to care, you stop caring. And that means that you aren't, you're not you don't have your heart's not in it. You don't have the energy for your work. And so you might find yourself being really sarcastic or cynical to your customers, to the people around you, the people or the things that you used to value. You don't value them anymore. So you're a little careless, you're a little sloppy, you're a little like, F it, like you don't have it. And then the third component is a diminished sense of personal efficacy. So the sense in which you're working really hard, but nothing is moving the needle forward. You're kind of pushing a boulder up a hill on a treadmill, like you're just not going anywhere. You're not moving forward. And so you have this really kind of warped filter with which you see the world. So it's a bad situation, right? You
yeah.
Assuming you used to love your work, you don't have energy for it, you don't care about it anymore, and you feel like it's pointless. And so that's burnout. And we can talk more about it, but it certainly is a really, really rough situation for entrepreneurs to be in.
And I'm curious because I don't know who said that on Twitter, but I came across that tweet of a guy saying that he actually kind of enjoyed this just pre-burnout phase, which for him was the illustration of the limits of, his brain, body, or whatever. And that at that point, it was for him the best way to know that it was rest. It was a rest time. And that after that, he could go back to really high intensity. And I think from what I've read on the peak performance, the book, it was basically their recipe to growth was growth equal, I think it was stress plus rest or something like that.
Yeah.
What is your view on this part of, having high intensity jobs and needed to grow maybe sometimes faster than the company and making sure that you can rest also? What do you have any framework to set this up, or what are your opinion on the topic?
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective, because I think sometimes it's the recognition of our exhaustion that gives us permission to rest. And that rest feels so good when you're so tired, right? And you just sort of collapse into bed. What I would hope for entrepreneurs is to have a rhythm or a sense that there are times when you drop into your work with deep intensity, right? You might work 12, 14, 16 hours a day for a couple days in preparation for a launch or a big project or something that's really driving you. And that's wonderful. How great to have something that you care about so much that you're going to go all in. But what is required then is a parallel level of rest and reset. So it's tricky because entrepreneurship, forming a company, is a marathon. It's years and years and years of work. And a lot of people treat it like a sprint where they're going really, really hard and they don't, give themselves any space for rest. But I think it's really like an interval training workout, if you've ever done something like that, where you go really hard and then you rest, and you go really hard and then you rest. And, there are these rhythms of rest that are consistent with the amount of output that's required to attain peak performance.
No, that's really interesting. And how do you feel like you can set up an environment towards, this recognition of burnout and kind of forcing you to rest? Because something I've noticed is that usually people, whether it's entrepreneurs or high performers, they are so passionate about what they do that they enter this phase without this phase of burnout, without even noticing it. And then their productivity tremendously drop. They don't understand why. So they put in twice as much effort, twice as much work. And then it's kind of this vicious circle where even if their manager is telling them okay, you should rest and you should go on holiday, they don't like it. They don't particularly enjoy it. And do you have some sort of best practices or even rules that you should follow to have this kind of high performance, but without risking this burnout side effect?
Yeah, I think on one level, practically, it's a calendar issue.
Okay.
Right? You look at your calendar, you look at the projects that you're working on, the things that you're working towards, the big launches you have, whatever it is. and you get really honest about what each of those tasks takes of you, and then how you are going to refuel afterwards. So if I look at my calendar for the next 3 months, I can identify, oh, that week is a beast. Like I have a book launch that week. I've got a presentation. The next week I'm flying to Scotland. Like I can look at it and say, I know that week is going to require 120% of my energy. So the next week, I'm clearing my schedule for 2 full days. Maybe I'm taking a really long weekend, and I'm not going to do anything except read and sit in my hammock and walk around the lake. So one just tool is to be very honest with yourself about the amount of energy that your work takes, and then to build in those rest periods. So it's all pretty predictable, to be honest, unless there's a crisis or we're very new at our work. The energy that we are going to be required to expend is quite predictable. And so the challenge is to be really honest about replenishing the energy and not believing the ultimate entrepreneur fallacy is that like that rest is for other people. I don't need that. I'm a little bit superhuman and I can work 80 hours a week forever and never be tired. Like we have to call bullshit on our own kind of ego that says that rest doesn't matter for us, because that's not true.
And sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think some rhythms for this too. Like I really like taking a retreat twice a year. So I usually take one in January and then one in June, where I take time away from everything that I'm working on and spend time just really reflecting on what's meaningful, what's important to me, how's my energy level? Do I need more rest? Do I need more connection with my kids? Do I need more time with my friends? Like you take an inventory by being very self-reflective and intentional about asking where my energy is. Because that's the other problem, I think, is that entrepreneurs can sort of function like Energizer batteries, where they just keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going and never stop for any kind of self-reflection to say, oh, am I enjoying this? Do I like that my life is like this? Like, am I happy here?
And for these retreats, how is this organized exactly? Is this just like you, I don't know, like booking someplace and you're on your own? Or is it like something, I don't know, like a organized retreat with potentially other people where you have like a meditation in the morning, then exercise? Like how exactly does that work?
Yeah, I do it by myself. And I wrote a little guide to founders retreats that can be helpful for people who are wanting to do something like this, but are structuring it for the first time. But you don't have to do it by yourself. You can go to a monastery. You can go to a meditation center. The point, though, of the retreat is to have a lot of open space. So if you're filling it with lots of like yoga class after yoga class, or like lots of activity, and lots of conversation with other people, that's not really the point. That's really valuable, but it's not that sort of deep dive into your own introspection that I think is really helpful here in burnout prevention.
No, that's really interesting. And for you, like after working, like a lot with founders who might have been, suffering from, like burnout or potentially anxiety and these type of things, how exactly like do you make sure to prevent those type of, like things of happening?
For me, how do I prevent those things from happening to me? Yeah. I have a really significant hobby, which I think is really helpful in burnout prevention. So my hobby is actually aerial arts. So I perform on the flying trapeze and I do aerial silks, and I really, really love it. And it's a great hobby for a couple of reasons. One, it gets me in my body. It gets me out of any kind of like hamster wheel repetition in my mind. And I'm free to completely focus on what I'm doing. And I'm not thinking about work. I'm not thinking about my entrepreneurial clients that I might be worried about. Like I'm just in my own world. So the other thing that makes this a great hobby is that it engages what I would call neurological diversification. So it uses very different parts of my brain than my day-to-day job, which is based in language and listening and human connection. My hobby is like visual spatial, it's physics, it's artistic expression, but it's very different. So that gives the brain circuitry that I use all the time, it gives it a break. It gives it like, okay, this part of the brain can rest and this part of the brain, you work now, which is really, really important and helpful for all of our brains in terms of preserving our brains to be healthy over the long period of our life. The other thing that I really love about having a big hobby that helps me with burnout prevention is I have a whole community of people that I spend time with who don't care what I do for a day job. They don't ask me questions about burnout or talk to me about depression, or we don't talk about the things they're worried about in their company. Like, it's a whole set of people who just are connected to me because of this shared interest. And they're this kind of supportive community, but they're also very easy. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs sort of lack relationships like that. You know, it's a relationship where I'm not the boss. I don't have any responsibilities. I just show up as one of the people doing the thing. So burnout prevention for me, and I think for probably a lot of other entrepreneurs, is about having something else that you care about that's meaningful for you, that uses your body, that uses different parts of your mind, and where you have relationships where you don't have to be the decision maker and you don't have to be the boss.
Now that's really cool, and I 100% agree. Also, it kind of like forces you, if you really enjoy a hobby, to spend time on it, which also helps you disconnected and not just fully focused on your work 24/7. And
Totally.
have you like for entrepreneurs, have you ever like tried to set up, I don't know, like kind of a routine or like an action plan to become more productive? So it's like avoiding workout, but also trying to be like more productive. Because I know like you coach people a lot on performance. So what's kind of like the process toward being more performant at work?
You know, it's one of the challenges of some of the productivity hacks that get really popular is that I think productivity is highly individualized. You know, we were talking before we really jumped into the interview about being morning people.
Yeah.
My most focused, awake, best hours of the day are the early mornings, like 6 a.m. to noon. And that is absolutely not true for other people. And so if I were to say, hey, miracle morning, the best way to proceed as a productive entrepreneur is to work from 6 to noon. I mean, that would be suffering for like my husband, for example, who like barely moves before 8 a.m. and would never, ever do anything meaningful and important at 6 a.m. So, I think one of the, you know, when I talk with people about performance and productivity, like you're asking a lot of questions. You know, when are you most awake? What are the conditions of your life that shape your ability? I think that's another challenge that, you know, this sort of axe I have to grind with some of the productivity, high performance, voices on the internet is like, you know, I have children and I want to see them in the morning and have breakfast with them. And they are a variable that shapes when I can work and how I can work. So the best productivity strategies are the things that really work for you and for your life. And the things that are not the huge stretch, but feel quite natural to how your brain works and to the rhythms of your day.
No, I agree. And yeah, I think it's all about testing and seeing what works best and adapting. And you mentioned like having kids. How exactly like do you manage? Because I know like Rob was also on the podcast actually. So entrepreneur, you another entrepreneur, having kids at home. How exactly do you manage like both things, like being a mother and an entrepreneur at the same time, and managing your time? And also, as you said, you know, like you're very productive in the morning, but at some point, you know, you also want to have breakfast with your kids.
They want to be fed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a dance, but here's the bottom line of it. This is, maybe this isn't helpful, but I'll say it anyway. Like, I really love what I'm doing. I love my work. I love my hobby. I love my kids. So it's actually not that hard because there's lots of things that I'm willing that I don't care about, that I'm willing to give up. I don't watch a lot of TV.
Mm.
Every once in a while on a Friday night, our family will sit together and watch a movie. But like if I'm watching a movie or a TV or YouTube or anything like that, I'm doing that with my kids. Like we're doing it as a family. So there are things that that aren't part of my life that are part of life for lots of people. But they're not part of my life because I don't have time for them and they're not important to me. The other thing that, has been really important to both Rob and I having successful businesses and raising children is we do the dance together pretty well. We've been married for a long time. And we have a lot of communication around whose turn it is. You know what I mean? Like next week, maybe 2 weeks from now, Rob's going on 2 trips. There are 2 microconf locals. So he's gone most of the week. And so over the weekend, we're going to reconnect as a family. And then the following week, I have a trip to San Diego. So when he's off, when he's away, I'm on. I am the parent in charge. And I'm happy to do that. I don't feel drained by that because I know the next week it will be my turn and I will have time to do a deep dive into my business and be with my colleagues and like do the things that are stimulating for me as a professional. So doing that dance and having really good communication around who has a business need that they want to pursue, whose turn is it to go out and be in the big world, and whose turn is it to kind of stay home and tend to the nest. And the fact that he is, I'll use this term for him, but he's a feminist. Like he believes that my work is as valuable as his. And that has unlocked this really wonderful partnership where I think it's not perfect, but both of us generally feel supported and feel like we have time to do the things that matter most to us.
No, that's great. And I do feel like, as you said, like the more you communicate, the more you set the expectations right, I think the better it and the smoother it gets. Something you mentioned a little bit earlier was that really the most important part, of trying to manage this mental wellness is to really manage your calendar and know, when you're going to have like a heavy workload, to maybe have like a couple of days after to rest. Sometimes I feel like, and probably like a lot of entrepreneurs, that the tasks keep piling up and that you feel like you need to do like everything. And sometimes unexpected things happen. So your calendar, even though you had put like these days off, etc., they actually like get filled easily. What is your what is kind of like your secret weapon not to get overwhelmed by tasks that could just be, like not the normal task, not or like all the other things that you have not planned, basically?
Yeah. I mean, unpopular answer. I'm probably slower than a lot of people. Like I'm slower to respond to email. I don't think email is an emergency. It might be like 3 days. And that's, there are probably times where that has cost me a consulting contract or a speaking opportunity because I just didn't jump on it right away. But it makes my work sustainable for me. So, I think having help, hiring appropriately so that you are optimizing the fluidity of your time, and empowering other people to help you and to do pieces of your business. That's something that I need to hire a director of operations. So I'm about to make another leap into accepting more help and taking myself out of the center of my business, which is always a challenge, but it's a challenge I'm ready for. So I think that's the thing is that I really believe that my life is mine. And I make lots of accommodations for the clients and the people that I care about, the people that I love. But ultimately, because someone sends me an email or asks me a question, does not necessitate a reorganizing of my life. So I'm okay if they wait a little bit. And I'm okay to do things on my timeline. That answer applies differently in different businesses, but I think almost universally entrepreneurs are a little bit hypersensitive about doing things faster than really is required.
Definitely. And I think like, yeah, it's really interesting because in the end, I do feel like the answer is also kind of like being disciplined, you know, like if you told yourself that you need to rest for like these days, just simply be disciplined enough not to add additional tasks or things that can actually be postponed, even though it looks like sometimes like a great opportunity or whatever, everything can wait.
And if you're not good at carving the time out to rest, then you need to sort of give yourself some other external motivations. Maybe it means that you book yourself a chalet or like a hotel room or something like up in the mountains. And so you've paid the money and you've made a plan and maybe there's no Wi-Fi there, like you have to kind of structure it around yourself if that sort of discipline is not easy for you. I've been practicing it for 20 years, being like, oh, I'll get to that later. I'm not worried about that email. But I think having those things that are carved out as kind of external factors can be helpful. And I also think it's a discipline to practice being without your phone, turning that do not disturb on and having a rhythm of hours in your day where you are not available. And so if you don't have that set up in your life, then yeah, it's really hard to be not available for days on end. But if you practice in little steps and say, okay, after 10 p.m., I am not available to the outside world, or during dinner with my family, I am not available to the outside world. Unless my house is on fire, I'm not paying attention. So those little disciplines, I think, of practicing detachment can be helpful in onboarding some of that deeper rest.
No, that's really cool. Do you have other like tips a little bit like to get better at either being like disciplined or maybe more involved?
Yeah, I do have clients who have like a safe, like, it's like a food safe where you can put your devices in it and set it for a certain number of hours.
Nice.
So like you can't get it out for a certain period of time. I kind of like that. I think also being in a community or being in conversation with other entrepreneurs who have similar values is important. There was a conversation going around Twitter a while ago about hustle porn, right? This like lie, the sexy lie that we're working all the time. And I love that, there's been this movement towards killing the hustle porn and saying like, that's not real. Nobody's doing that. That's not sustainable. Like, let's not pretend to think that's attractive anymore. So finding that community of people who are as interested in how you play and how you rest as they are in how you work is really helpful. And there certainly are pockets of entrepreneurial communities that really value the whole person and your whole self, which, those are good places to spend time because they reinforce the values that you want.
I think, yeah, I find it really interesting, like what you said about like this hustle porn culture and how people are going kind of against it. We also see like the very opposite of people who are, which I think is actually like a good question, because on the one hand, some people really enjoy to work hard and to work long hours. And a lot of people love to, pretend that 9 to 5 is, I don't know, like something for lazy people or people who don't have ambition, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But I do feel like there is definitely something in the middle. And in the end, I think what's really important is that people kind of like find their sweet spot, what do you want to accomplish? What do you want to do? Like, not everyone needs to be a top performer. Not everyone needs to be like an elite athlete or whatever, it's a interesting movement overall.
Is individualized, right? Yeah. Like sometimes really structured work hours are really helpful to peak performance, right? Yeah. You get rhythm, you get context cues, there's consistency. I know when I had really little children, I had very set hours when I worked and I had to be super focused and super productive in that time. But now my work is very different. Like it's a little bit more of that interval training that we talked about. Like I may work super hard, super long hours for a couple weeks. And then I have a week of travel or a vacation or camping or something. And I kind of honestly, I kind of work like 3 weeks on, 1 week off, 3 weeks on, 1 week off, which is a weird schedule, but it works for me in this phase of my life. And I would still consider myself like a pretty high performer. So I think that's the other thing about anyone who's telling you this is the way to work to optimize productivity is it's generally bullshit because it's not contextual to who you are, how you work, and the variables of your life. So you can be a super high performer and get lots done, make tons of content, and have your business growing really strongly by working from 9 to 3 every day. Other people are in a different phase of their business and of their life where maybe they're working more like, 10 p.m. or 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. And let's just stop being so bossy about how to work and stop worrying that we're doing it wrong. I think that's the thing is that entrepreneurs kind of look around to the other entrepreneurs on the internet and think, oh, they're faster than me. They're getting more done than me. Their business is growing more than me. I should use their strategy or their technique. And it's like, let's calm down a little bit about all of the productivity competition.
No, I agree. Too many productivity gurus out there also saying, I agree with you that productivity is so it's very individualistic, in the end. It's like each person is different. Each person works differently. Everyone has their own sleep cycle or whatever. It's not something you can standardize. And you were mentioning that you would set up, specific time to work on topics. Is it something you do a lot, like the time boxing, where you, identify, for example, I need to write articles, which is time where I'm maybe a bit more proactive and creative. So I'm going to do that everything in the morning. But let's say that after lunch, I'm usually kind of sleepy. So this is when I answer my emails or whatever. Yeah. What has been your strategy if you've done it a little bit?
Yeah. So my life is a little bit different than other entrepreneurs in the sense that I do spend a lot of hours in a week meeting one-on-one with people.
Yeah.
So, and I like that. I will probably always retain that. People give me a hard time because it doesn't scale or whatever, but I'm like, oh, it's my bread and butter. It's what I love. So usually, for my week, Tuesday and Thursday are carved out for client work. So that's usually 8 to 5. With some breaks in the middle.
Yeah.
Sometimes if I'm feeling really tired, I'll say, hey, why don't we talk on the phone and I'll go for a walk and you go for a walk and we'll do our meeting that way. But so those are really set aside times. And similarly, Wednesday afternoon is kind of carved out for meetings, for presentations, for direct calls with people. So that leaves Monday, Friday, half of the day, Wednesday. And those, depending on what I'm working on, those are times for writing. Those are times for, practicing a talk. It sort of, they're my smushy times that I fill in based on the priorities of the week. So I have a book coming out, in July, which means that Mondays and Fridays are basically podcast days. I just do podcasts and book promotion, and that's what I'm doing on Mondays and Fridays for the next month or so. And so it's nice to have that flexibility. Some things are locked in, but then there are these places where I can adjust what I'm doing and what I'm working on based on the needs of my company at any given time.
That's really cool. And what's going to be the book about?
Yeah, the book is called Touching Two Worlds, and it's about how high performers experience grief. So it's a heavy topic, but it's a topic that I think is really important for those of us who are the movers and shakers of the world to really have more proficiency in how to handle more difficult experiences that do invoke a sense of grief within us. So it's heavily memoir based. I wrote about that I lost my dad and my brother within 6 months of each other, very close together. So I had a big immersion into grief. And then I kind of reflect on my own experiences then as a professional and a psychologist and thinking about what kinds of practices were helpful. How do people stay focused on work when they're also having, a personal crisis or a family crisis? How do we move back and forth between the world of grief and loss and death and sadness, and also the world of joy and life and productivity and, creativity? So it's a book I'm really proud of. It's a lot of me. It's a lot of my heart put on the page. So we'll see what other people think about it.
Nice. I think it must have been like a heavy experience, like to write it, but potentially also like enlightening and liberating, no, also a bit.
Yeah, I think also, it's a universal experience. And that's what's so sort of surprising to me is that very few folks in the business world or in the entrepreneurial world are talking about how do you keep leading your company when your mom is dying of cancer? But that happens all the time. I mean, all of us will lose our parents. Like all of us will walk through grief and death. And most of us will, know someone who battles cancer. Most of us will know someone who battles mental illness or addiction. And we sort of relegate those experiences to the side and say, oh, they don't impact me as a business owner, as an entrepreneur. Like that's just, that doesn't matter to my day-to-day functioning. And I think that's not true. I think we spend a lot of energy in grief or caring for people in crisis. And it does shape the way that we show up in our companies. And so I wanted to have a more open conversation about that and give people some really practical tools. I draw from my life as a psychologist or my life as a yoga teacher, thinking about breath work and meditation and how do we fuel ourselves or resource ourselves when we're going through personal crisis to be able to show up in the way that we want to.
No, that's really, really interesting. Looking forward to the book. You have like an official date for the release, or?
Well, it just got moved. Apparently there's a paper shortage. I don't know. So the new release date is July 26th, but it is available for pre-order kind of around the world, wherever people are. So if you don't want to remember the date, then you can just order it now and it will arrive in July.
Where can people get it?
It's on Amazon. It's on, every major book retailer actually.
Okay.
And then there's a website if people are more interested in sort of the backstory. It's touching2worlds.com. So you'll hear a little bit more from me, a little bit more about the story.
Nice. We'll put the link in the show notes. Awesome. To wrap up kind of like the episode, I usually love to ask 3 questions. First one being, what's your favorite book or podcast?
Let's see. I've been reading a lot of poetry lately. So
nice.
My current favorite poet is Rupi Kaur. And so I've just been reading a lot of her poetry in the last couple of years. Podcast, I would probably say This American Life, which I know has just been around forever, but the story is just, they always work for me. They're always good.
Really cool. And your favorite bootstrap founder and why?
Oh, I'm gonna have to go Rob Walling on this one.
Okay, it was a trap.
The original. I know. I cannot answer any other answer. I will get in trouble.
That's good. No, I was ready to send that clip to Rob in case you said someone else.
If I said someone else, yeah, that would be a trap for sure. You're gonna get me in trouble. It has been such a pleasure to watch him, in his bootstrap journey from very simple businesses selling beach towels and bonsai trees and, just like random things, and to grow into obviously what Tiny Seed has become and what MicroConf has become. So it's wonderful to have a front row seat for that story.
Definitely. Very inspiring story. What is the favorite thing you do to regain energy or motivation during tough times?
Turn on music really loud and dance it out.
Nice. I like it.
Any kind of music, just whatever. It can be like thrasher metal every once in a while, or a little bit of hip hop. Just depends on the emotional need of the situation.
You need to vibe.
You need to vibe. Yeah. Get out of your head into your body and move it around.
Really cool. Well, Sherry, it was really great having you on the podcast. Where can people follow you and keep in touch with you?
Yeah, so I'm at Sherry Walling on Twitter and Instagram. My website is sherrywalling.com. And my company website is zenfounder.com. And the new book, of course, is Touching Two Worlds. So people can find that on the internet as well. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great to talk with you.
Same here. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Bootstrap Stories, the only podcast where bootstrap entrepreneurs share their journey in all transparency. If you enjoyed this episode, don't hesitate to leave us a review. And in case you want to see the interview, all episodes are live on the YouTube channel. Check out the link in the description and hit subscribe if you haven't already. Have an amazing day and make sure to also join us in our amazing Bootstrap community where we all helped each other to become successful and grow a profitable business. Take care and talk to you soon.